The wind rolled gently across the sprawling plains of what would one day become the deserts of North America. But in this age, the late Jurassic, it was a paradise of green. Towering conifers stood like ancient watchmen above sweeping fields of cycads and ferns. The morning light dripped gold across the land, catching the dew that clung to every leaf. In that glow, a massive silhouette moved with a grace that belied its size. Branthor, the Stegosaurus. Each step sent a tremor through the ground, a deep and steady drumbeat of survival. Plates rose from his back like jagged sails, painted in hues of crimson and amber that shimmered under the sun. His tail, armed with lethal spikes, swung gently behind him, a weapon that spoke of millennia of evolution's artistry. He was 30 feet of living armor, a sentinel of a world ruled by giants. Branthor lowered his small, beaked head toward a cluster of ferns and tore at the fronds with deliberate calm. The taste of the greenery filled his senses, bitter, fibrous, sustaining. His jaws worked slowly, grinding the plants into pulp as his mind drifted to instinctive awareness of the wind, the scents it carried, and the ever-present hum of life around him. Far away, a tremor of sound broke the serenity. A low, rolling bellow carried across the plain. Branthor froze, muscles tensing beneath his mottled hide. He raised his head, nostrils flaring. The call came again, vibrating in his chest like distant thunder. It was no warning from his own kind. It was the voice of dominance, raw and primal, a predator. He turned slowly, his plates catching the sunlight like bronze shields. The world smelled different, now musky, sharp, and metallic. The stench of blood clung faintly to the air. Somewhere beyond the line of cycads, death was moving. Branthor resumed his feeding, but his movements were slower, calculated. This was the season when predators grew bold. Dry winds had begun to parch the low plains, and waterholes shrank with each passing day. Hunger made tyrants reckless. He shifted his bulk and moved toward the shadow of the forest edge where cycads rose like green towers. Each step stirred memories, if memories could exist as shadows of instinct. Branthor had seen seasons of drought before. He had faced hunger, thirst, and the snapping jaws of those who thought him weak. But his plates bore scars of survival, and his tail was the judge and jury to any who came too close. Still, this year felt different. There was a tension in the land, a restless pulse. Herds had grown smaller, some vanished entirely. The rivers no longer sang as they once did. The earth cracked in places where water once lay. The air itself seemed brittle, tasting faintly of ash, as if distant mountains whispered of fire beneath their roots. Branthor pressed onward, lumbering through shafts of sunlight until the land opened before him into a wide clearing. There, at its heart, lay a pool of water shimmering like a jewel. Around its edges, life-gathered flocks of pterosaurs screeched as they dipped their beaks. Dragonflies skimmed the surface like living sapphires, and small herbivores darted nervously in the undergrowth. Branthor approached with steady dignity. The creatures scattered at his presence. Even the boldest of them knew to give way. His shadow fell long across the water as he lowered his head to drink. Cool liquid surged over his tongue, washing away the dryness. For a fleeting moment, peace returned, simple, elemental. Then the forest behind him exhaled a different breath. The air thickened, charged with menace. Silence rippled outward like a stone dropped into still water. Branthor froze mid-sip, droplets falling from his beak. From the tree line, a shape emerged, sleek, muscular eyes like molten amber. An Allosaurus, its gaze fixed on Branthor, with a predator's certainty. Hunger gleamed in those eyes like twin suns. It stepped forward, talons curling into the earth, teeth glistening with threads of old blood. Behind it, two smaller shapes slunk into view. Vanels, lean and eager, their movements quicksilver in the dappled light. Branthor turned slowly, plates flaring with the movement. His tail arched like a living scythe, spikes glinting wickedly. The Allosaurus snarled, a sound that clawed at the air, and began to circle. Its young mirrored the motion, forming a crescent of death around the Stegosaurus. Time thickened. Branthor's muscles coiled beneath armor and bone. The world narrowed to the rhythm of his heart, the weight of his breath, the scent of enemies on the wind. The first charge came swift, a blur of teeth and claws. Branthor pivoted with a force that split the earth, his tail lashing out like a hurricane. The Thagomizer struck with bone-crushing finality, meeting flesh with a sickening crunch. One juvenile crumpled, shrieking, blood pooling dark on the fern-littered ground. The Allosaurus roared in fury, lunging with jaws agape, aiming for Branthor's neck. Pain lanced through Branthor as teeth grazed his flank, tearing flesh. His bellow thundered across the clearing, a sound that shook even the pterosaurs from the sky. His tail swung again, but the predator danced back, circling, calculating. Blood dripped, hot and metallic, but Branthor stood like a fortress of living stone. Every instinct screamed, endure, endure, endure. This was not merely a battle for life, it was a battle for dominion over fate itself. The second juvenile faltered, fear sent rolling from its hide. The Allosaurus snapped at its offspring in rage, then lunged again. Branthor met it with the fury of ages, tail sweeping low, then arcing high spikes driving deep into the predator's ribs. The scream that followed split the heavens. The great hunter staggered, strength fleeing in crimson rivers. Silence returned by degrees, broken only by the ragged hiss of Branthor's breath, and the distant cry of scavengers awaiting their feast. The Allosaurus dragged itself into the undergrowth, leaving its dead behind. Branthor stood victorious but not unscarred. Blood streaked his plates, his legs trembled, yet within his chest beat the immutable drum of survival. He turned back to the waterhole, not as prey, not as victim, but as sovereign of this fleeting sanctuary. Slowly, painfully, he drank again. The reflection staring back from the surface was no longer that of a creature merely existing, it was of a titan enduring. Above, the sky burned with the last gold of day. Shadows stretched long, and the wind carried the scent of distant storms. Branthor raised his head to the horizon, where mountains loomed like sleeping gods. He felt the world shift, a tremor in the marrow of the earth, a whisper that time was moving, that nothing lasts forever. And yet, in that fragile eternity of dusk, Branthor stood, a monument of will, a guardian of a vanishing age. His steps carried him onward, into the gathering dark, where the stars awaited like ancient eyes. The world would change, oceans would rise and fall, mountains would crumble, but Branthor's story, written in bone and stone, would echo through the corridors of time, a hymn of endurance sung long after his kind had vanished. For in the heart of the Jurassic, beneath the gaze of an eternal sky, a Stegosaurus named Branthor claimed his place among legends, and there, in that wild and fleeting hour, hope endured,